This is episode 4 of A Creative Excuse, presented by Echo a Mano. Our next event is Saturday, May the 4th. It'll be a little acoustic concert with Colby Wilson and Adelia. 9 p.m., $5 to $20 sliding scale. Bring a pillow, because we don't have any chairs. It should be a really sweet, intimate musical event. And I look forward to doing more of those types of things at the gallery. This is Nina and Erin Elder. Was so happy to get them both in at the same time, and it was so much fun to talk to them. They're both amazing people, and they get me to talk a little bit more about Echo a Mano and kind of where I'm coming from with that. So I was grateful that they asked me those questions. I'm going to share a few things about Nina and Erin. Their upcoming projects are numerous. These are just a few of the things that are public facing that you could get involved with, possibly. So Erin Elder is teaching a place-based research course at Colorado College in May. She's speaking about her work at the Colorado Creative Industry Summit in Salida, Colorado on May 16th. She has a recent self-published book called The Rights of Land. It's available on her website, erinelder.com. And her support for artist business is called Gibbous, and you can learn more about that at gibbuscreative.net. Nina Elder is having a solo exhibition at the UNM Art Museum through May. She has a solo show at Site Santa Fe scheduled for June 14th through September 15th. A solo show at iMocha in Indianapolis, opening in September. Solo show in the fall at University of Wyoming in Laramie, and a group show called Hotspots, Radioactivity in the Landscape, traveling to over 5 museums over the next 4 years. My goodness. You can learn more about Nina at ninaelder.com, and thanks for listening. Yeah.
Hello! Sorry we're late. Did you get my email?
I did. Hi.
Hi.
It's so cool.
Ooh,
Hi.
Yay. Smells like you've been painting.
I've been painting. I finished painting today, and we washed the floors. They still look like shit, so I'm gonna refinish them.
Oh.
I'm gonna sand them over the weekend and put a finish on them. You too.
Groovy glasses.
Sarah gets like, I just want to trace your eyeballs with my eyeballs. I'm going to use the restroom.
Please.
Don't talk about anything too interesting.
Okay.
Absence.
Well, we are recording already.
I have to go to the bathroom after she goes to the bathroom.
We'll talk about all the interesting stuff while you're
And this is
Okay.
cute.
Yeah. So I want to have like a spot where people can just come and hang out and have tea and sit with me for a while, and so I'm gonna put some cushions here and
Yeah.
have little.
And what all is going to be in the space? I mean, I've seen some of your
Yeah.
postings, things you've collected, and
In
a lot of
general,
prints.
jewelry, and ceramics. A strong connection to Oaxaca. But eventually I see it as like all of the Americas. And I'm just starting with Santa Fe and Oaxaca because that's what I know.
Yeah.
And
You had a great trip there.
I did, yeah. It was short. It was like 5 days.
Oh, really? It seemed like you were posting for weeks. Or maybe you were posting after you came back. I was like,
I was there for 5 days, and it was interesting because like I've already exhausted all like the tourist stuff, and you start to develop a different kind of relationship with the place when you're a repeat visitor. And I'm getting to know people there and starting to see more about the social inequities and also the joy, and so it's deepening in interesting ways. Yeah.
that's so cool. And so will some of those people come here? Is there like a cultural exchange?
I hope so. I mean, I think that ultimately what I would like this to do is fund a residency program. You know,
I know that's a long-term goal of
we've
yours.
talked about that before.
Yeah, I just flashed on that house over there that you were looking at one point. There was like an old, beautiful house on Palace.
God, I can barely remember that.
Where do you want us to sit?
Here and here.
Okay.
I'm gonna go to the bathroom
Okay,
now,
you go.
and then I will.
And I will selectively edit the trips to the bathroom.
Okay. Does this hold me?
It should. I hope so.
It made a little creaking sound.
It creaks a little.
Yay. So do I sometimes. I don't know when the last time I saw you, but it's been a little while.
It may have been at Form of Concept.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm happy to see you here.
Yeah. I'm happy to have both of you here. What a frickin' treat.
I know, it's so fun. We're just cramming all this stuff in our little, like, very small overnight, which is so good.
Yeah.
It's good.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you're giving a talk at the O'Keefe tonight?
Mm-hmm. Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning.
We have this breakfast with O'Keefe.
She's going to be there?
Yes, I'm so excited.
Wow.
I'm glad we're not eating her for breakfast, but I'm glad she'll be there. But I'm kind of excited because isn't the Roundhouse in session right now?
Oh.
And I know that that a lot of people go to the O'Keefe and their events and that, and I'm giving a very political kind of rabble-rousing talk.
Nice.
Critiquing some certain things, so it feels like a good opportunity to use that.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Great. Can you be a little closer?
Oh, sure.
Great.
Gather around it.
Gather around
keeping us
the
warm.
pond
It sort of looks like a campfire.
What kind of campfire do you go to?
A little
Weirdo.
It's gonna warm my hands
campfire.
around the fire here.
Oh, it's so good to have you both here. You are both geniuses and amazing people and are so much fun and bring so much joy. And the fact that I get to talk to both of you and then somebody will hear this, maybe two people, I don't know.
Yeah. What is this?
Yeah, what is this? So I'm calling it a creative excuse. It's my conceit of getting together with creative people to talk because there's so many people that I see out and about that I don't often carve out the time to just hang out and talk to for an hour like this, you know. And so it's like if I have this thing and I'm like, it's a project, it makes it easier for my brain to like, ooh, I can carve out time for that.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, so that's kind of what it is. So it's podcast talking to creative people. There's not really, it's the format is just loosely conversational. There's no like
Where will you
structure and-
put it? Where will it go?
the interwebs.
Is it part of this place?
So I think it's going to be like presented by Echo Amano, but it'll kind of be its own thing. You know, not necessarily artists that are here, but just friends and people I like. Yeah.
Hurrah!
Hurrah!
Mostly artists.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, so like I'm
Or
going to be
creative
talking
people.
to Trisha English on Friday. So, I mean, she makes a magazine and it's a very interesting project and it's very creative, you know, so it's kind of broad, you know, so at first I wanted to call it an excuse to talk to creative people, but I thought that was too long.
I like it.
So, creative excuse. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that whole like projectification thing. Like you use a project to do something that you really feel called to do, but if it's a project, then you end up doing it because it has a form or it has an audience or kind of like makes it more real.
It's interesting. I mean, like I've thought about like, well, why don't I just make more dates with people? You know, which I can certainly do that. It's something where like my mind needs a project, you know, and it needs to feel like it's being productive, you know, and I don't know. There's something about like
you certainly are not productive enough without this podcast.
Oh my God, what am I doing to myself?
But we took the invitation more seriously. Like if you'd been like, hey, sometime we should just come up and get tea.
Yeah. So
we wouldn't have been like, okay, we're gonna do it on this on this day, you know. But we were like, right, done. easy to put it on the calendar.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Yeah. And there's something about like sharing it with other people too. And I also find like considering that somebody's listening, like I just assume somebody's listening right now, like, and how do I want them to, like, I don't know, thinking I have an audience changes how I ask questions and how I listen. I think I'm actually more objective. Like I kind of imagine myself as the audience, and so I'm kind of like, oh, how's this conversation going? Like, what's happening here? You know. So
that's your listening voice.
That was really good.
That is my listening voice.
Can you talk the rest of the time?
Yes, I think people will not be annoyed at all. The host sounds like an idiot. Oh gosh. So yeah,
fantastic.
that's elder sisters. Nina and Erin. Who's older?
Yes.
Who's elder? Goodness.
We always make people guess.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna say Erin by 2 years.
Exactly.
Well, not exactly. 2 years, 2 months, and 3 days.
Oh, well, pretty damn close.
Pretty darn close. Yep.
All right.
But Nina is taller.
Yeah.
And therefore we like to say that she is the big little sister and I'm the little big sister.
Yeah.
And I've always liked my name because Nina means little girl and Elder means older. So I have the whole time spectrum built into my name.
Right. And do you have a middle name?
Yes.
When Nina was young, she couldn't say her THs, so she said that her middle name was, or her name was Nina Cafalina.
Oh.
It's actually Kathleen.
Oh.
But Cafalina is
But
really
hearing you
cute.
saying that, it's
Cafalina.
like, yeah,
That's cute. That's cute. Do you have a middle name?
I do.
it's Christine. She doesn't
Rhymes
like
with
it.
pristine. Just like me, don't you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Did you grow up in Albuquerque?
No.
Why do I peg you both as like Albuquerque, like,
We've
We
been
are.
there for
Yeah.
a long time.
yeah.
Yeah. We live together there now.
Yeah.
In the South Valley. But no, we grew up in Colorado Springs for the most part and spent quite a bit of time in New Mexico growing up because our family has a cabin in the Pecos Mountains, so we have some familiarity. But then I first moved to New Mexico to go to college at UNM, and then we've played leapfrog ever since. And Erin moved to Albuquerque, and then she moved to San Francisco, and then I moved to San Francisco, and then we've always lived in the same place in some overlapping way. So, but Albuquerque has the most return cycles for both of us.
But we were in Taos, we were in Santa Fe. This is my second time third time in Albuquerque, and Nina's second time. But I think collectively we've both lived in Albuquerque longer than anywhere else other than our home.
And when did you first come to Albuquerque?
2000.
2002.
I hated it at first because it was August and everything appeared to be brown and hot, and I thought it looked like a John Wayne movie backdrop, and I thought I was going to die.
It may have been.
It may have been. And then
Some point.
20 years later, we're still around, and I love it.
Yeah. And were your parents artists, creative people?
Well, our whole family is quite creative, and
Yeah.
we've recently discovered that every person on our mother's side in the extended family, our cousins included, have degrees, college degrees in creative things like music, theater,
Opera performance. MFAs in sculpture.
Right, but we are the first, along with our cousin, to pursue art as a vocation. So for most of our family, art is something that's like a hobby, a thing to support. Like they're great art supporters, but I think we've really struggled actually to gain the trust and endorsement of our family, because it would be so much easier to make a living doing something else and just do art as a fun thing on Sunday afternoons.
Yeah. Do you think it's like maybe not easier, but like there's more avenues now than, let's say, in your parents' generations and before? Like, in certain ways, like, is it more acceptable, or like, I don't know. I'm just thinking about like why now? Like, all of a sudden, two people in your line are like, yep, this is what we're going to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think Erin and I have unique skills that have allowed us to have hybrid practices. We both have been arts administrators. We both have been independent arts administrators, and we both have been professional artists.
Mm-hmm.
And I think...
And we hustle a lot of side hustles.
Yes.
That are all creative.
That are all creative. And I think that maybe people in our family would have hustled the hustle had that been a possibility, but it was a much more single stream economy until our generation.
Yeah.
And the women, in our family were housewives, many of them, until the kids were grown. Our mother went back to work when we were in high school. Our grandmother, she was very well known as a theater actor and director in her small town, but that was all volunteer work. And that's kind of, I think, how women of that generation could participate in art, was on a volunteer basis. Her husband was a doctor, so she was able to kind of balance those things.
And through churches, everyone in our family has been really involved with their churches. And so I think that has been a venue for,
music,
dance, theater, all of this has been something that comes through their church life and not their professional life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting you're talking about, well, it's clear that both of you are mega hustlers. I mean, like, it's clear you all are both very, very hardworking, and I think it's inspiring. You mentioned like the arts administration, arts practice. That's something for me that I've never found I've been able to do both. Like, I tend to be a kind of like all-in kind of person, and I went to school for art and did that art school thing, and then found myself in arts administration really loving it and loving the container of supporting artists, and found that I really thrived in that kind of action. Can you talk a little bit about, either one of you, about how you balance those things?
Well, Erin's amazing because you're
Let me count the ways.
Well, I would say all of your energies are in supporting artists, and it doesn't, I mean, maybe we're all this way, but I don't see it distracting you from your own creativity or pulling you away from it. It's actually, the farther you've gone into supporting artists, the more clearly you've identified as an artist yourself.
Well, I get a lot of confidence for my artist side from working with artists. I feel like I learn so much. I have a business that supports artists one-on-one through this kind of career development and just helping them get stuff done. And I get really intimately involved with people, and I've learned a lot of strategies, I think, about how to prioritize creativity, how to talk about creativity, how to live, different ways, that there are so many, options. There's not just one version of being an artist. So for me, I think that's given me a lot of language, I guess, for understanding myself. But I also really keep them separate, I both in terms of time, how and where I talk about my work, the kinds of opportunities I seek out. But I think curating, which is really where my work comes from, is a deeply creative practice. And I always felt like a curator, an artist in a curator's body. And I don't know what more to say about that. I could go on and on. But I think that I have to be active creatively as a curator or as an artist to gain the trust of my clients, so that they know I'm sort of legit. I have to keep participating in the world. I can't only be a coach. I have to be kind of navigating the creative world myself in order to be relevant to them.
That makes sense, yeah.
I felt like I just talked for half an hour.
No, it was the best half hour ever. It flew by for me.
But Nina has a totally different way of making those things.
Mine's far more blended, and I'm kind of at a confusing time right now where I'm working on larger projects, and so I think I'm valuable as a project administrator where I can write the grants, and I'm really comfortable presenting to the board or the funder about what the project is, and I enjoy that. And then, but for me, really, that's part of this whole larger creative process of getting larger projects off the ground and gaining trust and gaining funding. And I don't want to separate them as much, but it's sometimes a challenge to say, am I being an artist right now, or am I being a consultant? And how do I position myself to this project? And I enjoy it sometimes, but there's also some challenges involved with that, and also some ethics that are I love thinking about ethics, so I don't mind that.
What specifically comes up that feels like it's challenging ethically?
Yeah, I've had a couple situations where as an artist I go deep into the heart of an organization, and I'm seeing how they are, and it feels like my art medium. It's like, oh, this organization, I'm like working in it, but I'm as an artist. And then all of a sudden they say, can you help us with our strategic plan? And to me, I'm like, I think you should pay me my consultant's rate for that. It's very different to be an artist or to be someone consulting. Or I do a lot of work that allows organizations to work more interculturally. I'm showing them how to reach out to people they haven't reached out to before. And sometimes that reveals things about white supremacy or cultural exclusionary practices, and then they'll want me to help them solve that. And sometimes I think my job is just to shine the light on it rather than help them fix it. And so that's a really interesting navigation that I'm in right now.
Yeah, do you ever find that, there's a difference in the let's say mission or goals, but difference between the artists and an institution like that? Is that a tricky place to navigate, where you might find an institution's ultimate sort of objective is way off base from maybe where you want to be?
Yes, because they often just want a nice feel-good piece of art that they can point to and be like, look, we're working with artists. And I show up and I'm curious about their board structure and their funding and all of that. And so I think I'm a much more complicated package than most people think they're getting, but I'm okay with that.
But it's also great because Nina's doing all of this really holistic work that it involves outreach and it involves administrative skill. And so in some ways, her practice brings a lot more than a piece of art. But they have to be able to recognize that and value that, I think, so that Nina doesn't become exhausted or, the equity is there.
Do you find that you're really interested in the systems and structures of a thing and investigating and
how stuff works?
That?
Right. My art is all about how the systems came to be, and my process is also about looking at how things have come to be, including how do I show up in this organization.
And you recently were up in Anchorage doing that, right?
Yeah, I did a project with the Anchorage Museum. They have an interesting, it almost feels like a storage issue, but it's not. They're half of that museum is the Smithsonian and half of it is a municipal museum. And they just have some kind of identity issues around that, and bad colonial practices that are embedded in there. And I spent a lot of the summer thinking through collecting strategies and communication strategies.
For the museum.
For the museum, yeah.
And when they approach you for a project like that, what's the ask? What's the pitch? Nina, we want you to...
Well, I kept joking that they wanted me to be the decolonizer in residence, which would be the worst thing ever because I'm a white outsider. So I just really treated it as a research opportunity and just spread my research really deeply with the staff. And I wrote a poem that I think is my the highest form of my consultation response. And that's
you also made an artwork that they purchased for their collection.
That didn't feel like as much out of the consultation. That more felt like a more personal response that they decided to acquire.
Yeah. And, thinking about personal responses, your shift from working with an institution, in a curatorial capacity to moving into deeper relationships, this one-on-one sort of thing. I feel like in certain ways I'm moving into something similar where I feel like I'm really downsizing, I'm really downscaling and looking at how I can more deeply dive into more one-on-one personal relationships, with this space. Like every person that comes in the door, I'm the one they talk to. Every artist, I'm the one they talk to. Is that ring true to you at all, or are there other things going on?
I think after working in an institution that had 12 to 15 shows every year, plus events and whatnot, I was exhausted by the short-term nature of these relationships. And you work with people and you get close and you care about them, and then before they're even done, you're on to the next thing.
Right.
And I felt like I really craved long-term relationships. And now I'm working with people on, 2, 3, 4 year stretches. And maybe that will go on longer, I hope. But it's a really amazing thing to just watch something evolve and feel like we're co-authoring that relationship without the institution telling us what our budget is or when we have to, show up and what form it has to take. But we're making it up as we go.
Something that I love about seeing how you work is Erin's work with artists is confidential for the most part, and that takes so much of that power hierarchy out of it. You're not promising anything, and you're not offering anything, and you're not hand selecting your clients. There's nothing elite about what you're doing. It's a private relationship that benefits them in a very expansive way, but they choose how they moderate that. I think it's so generous in that way, in a way that curating with an institution or selecting work to be in a commercial gallery is not.
It's very weird though, and I struggle with this because it's so invisible, and the art world is so much about what is visible. And one of the things that I'm really thinking about is how to make this work more more accessible. How do people know about this? Because I find it to be extremely transformative, but I also don't want to out my clients or, I want to protect that space. So, what kind of podcast could I create, or what kind of book could I write, or, how could that sort of how could there be more evidence of that work that's happening? It feels like we have this very secret kind of relationship, and the success isn't dependent on each other. It's a mutually beneficial relationship, and I love that. The bond is actually very intimate and personal. But I think in the art world, there's this need to make things explicit.
Yeah.
So it's a conundrum, and I think in some ways, again, that also keeps me more publicly active through, curating in my own kind of artwork and teaching, because it's so important to have a more public-facing part of your practice.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about how that confidentiality, how that benefits either you or the client?
Well, they can talk to me about anything and anybody, and it's kind of like a therapeutic relationship in that way. I'm not going to go tell their gallerist that they outed them about something, and
Makes sense.
It also means that I'm not going to bat for them. I'm not an agent, so in that way, our success isn't dependent on each other. I'm not taking a commission off of grants. I'm not taking a commission off of sales. So there's just this value to the work that is based on an hourly rate. And it's up to us to make that really potent and valuable. And because it's a collaborative working relationship, it takes both of us inputting into it. And so I think that's really special. And It also keeps me, I can help people at any career level, and they're not, and my clients aren't judging each other or comparing amongst themselves. It just makes it really specific and individual.
Well, and it sets expectations, certain expectations from the beginning, like that the acting as an agent's an interesting one, right? Like, because like I have friends that are artists, and I spend time with them, and I do studio visits and things like that. And I'm not necessarily going to show their work, and sometimes there's these implicit sort of like things that get dropped about like, oh, are you going to show my work here, or oh, what can you do for me, sort of thing. And and that's fine, and I understand that, but I think that's cool, setting it from the get-go that that's not what this is about. I think opens up certain levels of trust too, right?
Definitely.
And intimacy. I think as artists, sometimes, I'll speak for myself, it becomes exhausting to try to, when you're in the hustle, to put your game face on all the time, and just to have someone where you don't have to have your game face on, but they still have got your back. I just think that's amazing. And I think it's, we need to start acknowledging sometimes that being an artist is isolating because it is competitive or because it is so public facing.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be an artist, and I think that's, maybe also one of the reasons why our, ancestors didn't pursue it. They went on to do other very challenging things, but like I feel like that's a big calling that I have, is to sort of meet that vulnerability of artists and be an advocate for that, and help create more safe space for artists to, understand what they're doing.
Yeah, I feel really similarly about what I do, and I mean, part of it is recognizing like I don't feel like I had the grit, I think, to really try to make it as an artist. I think that it takes a lot of tenacity and willingness to sacrifice, especially financially, in order to do that. And I don't think I was willing to do that. So
but it made you sensitive to that.
Totally.
I mean, you really get that because you looked yourself in the mirror and really saw what that involved.
Yeah, and I think that's what gives me so much joy about creating a space or an avenue for artists to do what they do. That really gives me a lot of joy.
Yeah, sure. You are a real advocate of artists. I think I've always appreciated that you are not just opening these gallery spaces to like make a quick buck or even to make people famous, but there's like, I see that you care about creating communities and a culture of the culture of a space and the culture of a relationship, and really thinking about how to what is supportive.
Yeah,
certainly there are sales are a big part of that.
It has to be. I can't do it without it. I was talking with someone earlier about this, where like I could, if I have to really keep it in balance. Like if I were to just not think too much about sales and just show like, oh, I'm excited about this, I want to show it, I'll be out of business. Because I get really excited about things that aren't very commercially viable, and if I just focus on sales, I'll be unfulfilled. I worked at a Southwestern gallery for 7 years, and for a while it was great because it supported my family for a while, but then after a while I was the director of that gallery, and then I could only do it for like 9 months because I didn't care about the work. And the pay was really good, and I had to quit because it was just like, oh God, this is like killing me, so it has to be a balance, and so that's one of my challenges, is to try to keep all of that in play.
The whole money thing and like the transaction of art, I think is really such an interesting question, and it's something that I think Nina has done really well at, is like monetizing her work in a way that is kind of non-traditional. I mean, yes, she creates objects that sometimes get bought, but
Very, very, very rarely. They are made out of toxic waste for the most part.
But I think it's really interesting how we all, I mean, that's a creative act in itself, is like, how do you make the money work, you know, because we all need it. It's a resource that we depend on. And so, and you're in this, you know, really interesting transactional space with, you know, collectors and
Canyon
artists.
Road, for
and
God's
you're
sake.
on Canyon Road. Look.
Art Transaction Central.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so what does that feel like? You're kind of entering into this space that has had a culture of its own, and I imagine there's some of that you're wanting to continue and take on, but
driving up here, we
apart.
said, the rarefied air of Canyon Road. And it doesn't feel that way in this space, but it still is in that rarefied air.
Yeah, it's trippy. I mean, when I was first thinking about opening a space, Canyon Road was not on my radar. I was like, nope, I do not want to be on Canyon. And, you know, it's part of it is because it is so commercial, and there are so many places that feel the same, and I wanted to do something different, you know, and yet at the same time, I also want it to be comfortable. I want it to be a place where people can come in and not feel like they're excluded, you know, either financially or by the art. And then when I was working at Open Tia Cafe, and Bobby came in there and overheard me saying, "Oh, I'm looking for a space." He's like, "Oh, I'm moving out." And so I was like, "Whoa, it's on Canyon, right?" And so I went up here and looked at it. And when I walked in, it was like, oh, it just like, it felt right. And it was like, yeah, I can make this work. And it was sort of shocking to me, because I was not expecting that at all. So
I can't wait to see what you do.
Yeah. I hope it is contagious, whatever you do here.
Well, I am right next door to Frank and Mariana with Currents, which is a really nice street.
Right.
You know, they're friends.
And that kind of comes back around to your past in an interesting way.
I know, yeah.
Parallel universes.
Yeah.
I'm sure they never thought they would be on Canyon Road either.
No, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's room for other stories on Canyon now. You know, Toma Foundation's up here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe there's room to shift the Canyon Road narrative.
Yeah. Do it.
I like being at the top, like where it's like right at the, right across from the Tias, right on Palace. Like, I don't know, it feels like easy exit if you need to. You know?
I used to work at the compound, and I remember getting stuck over and over in the middle of summer. I'd be trying to get to work or trying to leave work, and just that sense of bottleneck. And I remember I lost my shit at one point, and I leaned out my window to these people that were standing in the middle of the road just taking photos, just blocking traffic, and I said, "I know you won't believe it, but this is my work commute." And they were just standing there close enough that I could lean out my car window and say that to them. And yeah, it's that density that's not always comfortable, but hopefully all those people spend a lot of money here.
Yeah. Well, that was something that I think you were in the restroom when we were talking about, like, for me, the next step is looking at this as a way to fund a residency.
Okay.
And where I think it might be going is some kind of exchange between artists in Mexico and Santa Fe. There's a huge printmaking community down there. There's a huge just artisan network, just enormous. And I think like the weavers and the potters, there would be some really interesting exchanges, especially in those communities, and printmaking too. So that's one thought about where it could go.
But what about the wall? We're trying to keep those people out.
Oh yeah. Forgot about that.
Hopefully by the time this podcast gets published, that joke is just not even
it was a joke.
Well, it sounds like the emergency declaration might be fading. So
but it is a politicized move in some way to create a cultural exchange with
so many people are willing to take the art and the food of Mexico and abandon the true intercultural workings that have allowed this part of the United States to have the culture that it does, and certain parts of Mexico to have the culture that it does. So I'm excited to hear your talk of a residency, because that's, those are relationships. That means there's real people. That means there's advocacy. There's, when you invite a living artist into a place, they bring everything with them. They bring their politics, they bring their beliefs, they bring the way they grew up, they bring the language that they speak. And I think it's so vastly important to not just bring the art and bring the food.
Yeah, for sure. And you both have been involved in residencies.
We started one together.
We started one together. What draws you? I mean, it sounds like you maybe have already answered the question just now, but what draws you to that?
Well, I think about residencies all the time. That's kind of been my career path, has been directing residencies, starting residencies. Now I work consulting with residencies, but I'm also really supported by residencies. I do a lot of them, or I kind of make up my own. But I think that opportunity to not separate the art from the artist is really radical and really transformative, and it shows the hosting organization and community what it has to offer. You can't pre-script those relationships, so you're learning on the fly when a real living person shows up. And I think that's the most important thing, is to understand what we're offering and what we're needing, and to be in relationship with that and not make assumptions.
Yeah.
And when you remove the art from the artist, you can frame the art how you want to, but when you take it in a more holistic, living, breathing way, there's only room for transformation.
And that's what's tricky about a commercial space, about a transactional type environment where somebody comes in and pays some money and takes some art home, is how do you introduce that human element? How do you, educate people? How do you bring the connection between the maker and the object and the collector,
Is that something you're interested in doing?
Heck yeah.
Do you think it would be good for sales? I often wonder if part of what helps art sell is the fact that they don't have to think about the artist. It can just be an object. They don't have to embrace the person's politics or point of view or what they look like, or it can just be this pretty thing that they take home. To put it bluntly, I mean, maybe that doesn't give customers or collectors enough credit, but I sometimes think
for a certain type of collector that is the case. I think that's true. But I think that there's also people out there that do want to create deeper connections and do want to know where things come from and how they're made and what goes into them. And I'm really interested in connecting with those people, so I think it's I have to nourish those types of clients too, and find out who those people are.
Yeah, and I think that people really do like the backstory. I mean, it's something that I feel like as a curator I come to understand is people love the studio visit. They love the interview. They love the artist talk, that feeling of getting behind the scenes is really valuable to people. And I don't understand why galleries don't do that more. Commercial galleries don't do that more, because it does seem like it's another way to draw people in and create that intimacy that I think people are longing for on so many levels.
There's fear about clients and artists mixing. I think there's some galleries that feel like that if they introduce them somehow,
the gallery will be eclipsed.
I've heard that so much, where oh, they're gonna sell behind our back, or oh, the client's just gonna go directly to the artist, and I think fear drives a lot of that mindset, and it's just an old model, and I don't think it's valuable anymore, because it's it's so easy for artists to sell online, so just embrace it. Who cares?
Right.
And just find another way to do it, because the world's changed, babies. It's come on.
Right. You have this gift of charisma where people are going to want to keep working with you, or wanting those relationships to be somewhat facilitated.
Who would ever want to screw you out of a deal?
I know. But that whole austere gallery owner lime green 90s idea. I think that is gone, where they have their corral of artists that no one's allowed to touch.
Yeah.
That's really boring.
But I might wear lime green pants.
Yes.
Well, just so the audience knows that this entire space is painted black and has a mirrored ceiling, and there's asymmetrical lime green shapes on the walls that he's going to hang the art on.
Yeah, and there's actually rows and rows of black turtlenecks as well.
Oh, good.
Wireframe glasses on the turtlenecks. That's just how I roll.
Thank you, listener.
What shoes are you going to wear?
You know, I actually bought a pair of shoes in Mexico that I'm really excited about. Made right outside of San Agustin by a team of, shoemakers.
How cool!
And it's leather and fabric, and there's like Zapotec designs woven into the fabric of the front of the shoes. They're really gorgeous.
Mm. You are literally walking your talk.
Can I ask you a question?
Please, sure.
There's so much.
There's a lot of ways that we could probably do this like 3 more times.
We could do this for 3 hours 3 more times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But something that I really do want to hear you talk about, because you came from a Southwestern gallery background,
yeah,
and then you were in the more contemporary art, but you pushed that into a place where you were bringing artists that have been culturally cloistered, but you were bringing them into a contemporary art dialogue, and now you're doing Hecho a Mano, which has this Mexico and Santa Fe thing, but I think there's so much fear around intercultural relationships right now, and appropriation and exploitation, and who is the buyer and who is the seller, and the power differentials in there. I just would love to hear you talk about.
And who's entitled to be each of those.
Yeah, sure. It's funny, like one of the things that I was thinking a lot about in choosing a name for this space is like, once I kind of was like, I think I like that name. It's like, I'm just like waiting for the moment when somebody's like, who are you to choose a name like this, with this language? And, it's interesting. I mean, I work with a collective in Oaxaca that works directly with pottery makers in different villages. So they not only help them sell work, but they do these workshops where they'll spend a whole weekend with the village and figure out, okay, how do we make this work sustainable? What are the demands that buyers are placing on you? What kinds of things do you need in order to continue this type of work and this lifestyle? And he was talking about how to them, they represent privilege, right? And they're also going to like these rich people in Mexico City asking for money. And it's a totally opposite relationship for them in that point of view. And then for me, going to Mexico, to these makers, I represent privilege. And even to, the people running this collective, right? So I think for me, the thread starts with following interest, just a sort of natural interest in something, and taking it deeper and deeper and deeper, and just taking those steps closer and closer to what I think, what draws me. I assume that there's some core of truth somewhere in there. And so if I honestly follow those things, I will somehow get to that, And a big part, I think, of what I'm doing here is, it's just coming back to relationships, and what is the story that's being told, right? Am I trying to tell my story about what I like? Am I just, this is me, this is the Frank Rose Gallery, and these are the things that I like. How many galleries have the owner's name in front of them? And I feel like I try to step back as much as possible. And I feel like not only does it feel like the right thing to, like, I don't know, it feels like a duty almost to like, okay, how much can I remove myself from the equation of allowing an artist to tell their own story, you know, especially when it's, you know, when there is that power differential, you know, when I am coming from a wealthy country and I have grown up in privilege, I've never known hunger, you know, I've never been homeless, never had the threat of it, you know what I mean? And, you know, one of the things that is happening as I return to Oaxaca is, as I've exhausted all of the sort of tourist tendencies, the reality of the city becomes clearer. You know, I'm not distracted by going to this, you know, archaeological site or this thing or the colors of the buildings or, ooh, this food is delicious, which it really is. And I'm seeing more clearly just the reality of the day-to-day situation of the people that make Oaxaca City their home. And there's a part of me that's like, oh, I can turn away from that, right? I don't have to go back. I can just do email business with these people. Part of this last trip, what was so important to me was, before starting this gallery, was that I go down there and meet the artists that I've only had online interactions with. And it just felt like that was the right thing to do. Again, coming back to the importance of relationships, you know, and I feel like that comes back to what this business is becoming for me as well, is about creating stronger relationships, about a one-on-one connection. And you were talking about, I don't know, one of you were maybe both of you at the same time, you know, coming to that. You use the word holistic, and I think it's an overused word, but it's so true when you think about it, the necessity, from my point of view, of looking at the entire cycle of a maker, of an object, of a buyer, of the place it's sold, how it's sold, the culture that it comes from, and looking at it as a whole entity, right? And in a lot of these galleries where, you know, you don't have the opportunity to meet the person, it's totally out of context. It's completely out of context. Even the ability to touch something, you know, takes it out of context, you know. And so one of the things I want to do is make sure that as much things as possible, people can actually get up and touch them, you know. Again, it's the connection, creating a relationship, you know. I don't know if I answered your question or if you have a follow-up, but I mean, it is something that I'm thinking about. And I think part of it is a willingness to be humble and to ask questions and to listen and not be the one speaking all the time, which I just have done.
Well, I also imagine, just hearing how you talk about Canyon Road, if there's some energy in Oaxaca that's wanting to push boundaries, change the export cultural identity of Oaxaca, you could help a person be an agent of that within Oaxaca. You know, I think that that's something that, you know, why do we leave our communities? Why do we work outside of our hometowns? Why do we show our art in places we don't live? There's an import to it too, which is sometimes you help someone take risks that they can't take there by themselves.
Yeah.
Which I would just imagine, knowing your personality, you might be that helping people become better change agents.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot there, and I certainly haven't dug deep. I've dug as deep as I have.
Right. Well, I think those things you can't know till you're in it. You know, that's the whole thing about working with living artists. It's all going to change.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I've been thinking about a lot lately, which dovetails a little bit with what you're talking about, is kind of the potential to exploit others. And I think we're living in a moment where all of our kind of unintentional exploitations are being brought to the surface, you know, whether it's conversations about, you know, sexual predator activities or gentrification, or hurting somebody else's feelings on social media. You know, there's like all of these ways that I feel like we're being held to task for our actions and really having to look at our impact on others, which is a painful moment culturally, I think. And I feel like some of what we're talking around is that kind of the politicalness of this moment and how to do the right thing as a white person of privilege. And I guess something I keep thinking about, like, how do we deal with this, is duration and commitment, and really sticking it out with people, you know, and not just having these super fast relationships, and not just hanging up the telephone on somebody, and not just going there once and buying their art and then just continuing the conversation by email, but like the durational commitment is actually what undermines exploitation, or whatever that is, like keeps it from being exploitative. And because you're sticking it out and you're paying attention and you're responding and course correcting, but it's really hard to do that unless you're in it for the long haul. And I love thinking that in this moment, the antidote might actually be to slow down and stick to it. It's like the opposite of this, you know, bling bling, always changing spectacle culture that I hope are coming out of. But I feel like the real work that you're doing, or that you're talking about, is has commitment at its core.
Well, and if you're in a real relationship, there's commitment, right? And I think when you're in real relationship and you're committed, it's harder to close your eyes, you know, and because you care, and there's love there, and I think I was listening to somebody talk about the way that they looked at love is just expanding your circle of self, and like looking at others as you, and that affecting somebody else is affecting you. And I really liked looking at love that way. And when you're in relationship and you're expanding your circle of self with somebody, and there's something there that is difficult to look at, you know, for me, it's like I'll be more willing to look at it, you know, because it's like, oh, this is the part of me. So I think that you're right. I think that antidote is relationship, it is duration, and because I think for me, and if I'm, you know, it creates creates an environment, a condition for greater honesty, I think.
Whoa.
Yay.
Thank you for asking that question. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that, you know, there's way more to go there. Like, if it was easy to bring the artists to the US, I would love to do that. But freaking actors in Roma can't even get visas, you know? Like, it is a weird situation, especially between Mexico and the US right now. You know, so to even like provide a space where like it's being like there's like real contemporary culture happening beyond the stereotypes is a way to start moving that dialogue.
But don't you think New Mexico is like such a special place in terms of, I don't know, I think, I would like to think that New Mexico is perhaps more open to Mexico, for instance, because of our proximity, the shared history, ancestral ties. You know, there's, even compared to Arizona, I feel like we're more open to Mexico than, generally speaking, than other parts of the country. That doesn't mean that we don't have our own kind of inbred cultural differences and, you know, challenges coexisting, but I feel really proud of New Mexico as like not having quite the tenor of xenophobia that is emanating from other parts.
Well, there's curiosity too, I think, because there's so many close ties, which you just described. When you feel like you're similar but different from something, you can't help but say, oh, what are the differences? And usually that is the beginning of curiosity, is to, well, it's either the beginning of xenophobia or curiosity. And I would like to think that these kinds of things that you're saying are the beginning of curiosity. Say, we're so similar, but something more than a border has changed these evolutionary paths as two different places, and how do we reach across that and celebrate it?
So what's that line? I think that's really interesting. Like why are some people threatened and other people are curious? Or how can threat be transformed into curiosity? Like, because it can go both ways, you know? And I love that what you're saying is, I think that's a beautiful path to consider.
I think it's the difference between passion and compassion. Passion just means that you want to see through your own eyes, and that your heart and your eyes are in a very closed feedback loop. Your own perspective of how you see the world and how you perceive it, and your beliefs that you hold in your core. And compassion is the desire to look through somebody else's eyes and have that influence your heart.
That
and
expansion
your
of self.
That expansion of self that you were just describing. I think that the United States built itself in this way of wanting to have a fierce identity and passionate patriotism, and it did this. It actually created all these series of isolations that can be challenged through compassion. I don't know how to make that happen, but I can see the difference.
There was, what was it? There was some study where they were doing this thing door to door and asking people about their beliefs on abortion. And, you know, people who were like saying on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, 1 being, you know, pro-choice, 10 being completely pro-life, you know, where are you? And they'd be, I don't know, 10, you know, and then it was, I'm going to get it wrong, but it was something like they would tell them a story about themselves. The interview would be like, oh, well, this was my experience. I had an abortion. This is my circumstance. And then they would come back like a week later and they'd be like, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, where are you? And they'd be like, oh, I'm a 6. You know, and it's, again, I think those connections and like knowing people and knowing that these are human beings rather than like some ideal that you hold in your head. Like these are like real things that people live, you know.
Well, and what I love about that, that there's a story in it, you know. I think facts and data and belief and names of political parties, those are just one word and you can put a period after it. But a story, you know, it has like a life beyond itself, and it, you know, once we start to have a suspension of disbelief, is that the phrase? Where we're like, oh, I can go along with this story, I can imagine it in my mind's eye. Then all of a sudden you're having empathy, you're having compassion. That's why we need art.
Yeah, I feel like I've learned so much about the world from reading novels, you know, and even though they're fiction, it's like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes who lives in a different place or a different time, you know, or is a different gender or whatever. I feel like it's an amazing tool for developing empathy and curiosity, and that's just one art form, you know.
Just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it's not true.
That's right.
I heard that somewhere. I was like,
I love that. I'm learning a lot about empathy, or I don't know if it's necessarily empathy, but this project I'm working on, I'm working with students in all of these departments at the University of New Mexico, but very few of them are from the art department. So when I start working with them, I say, can you tell me what astrophysics is? Or can you tell me what psychology is? Or can you tell me what Middle Eastern literature studies are? And hearing students talk about why they chose to study something and why they're devoted to it. So many of them have never actually said it out loud until I asked them that. And it's really cool to hear, because I think a lot of these things we don't realize we've made a choice, and that many things along the way have led us to that choice. And hearing them talk about the choices that have led them to that moment, where as a college student there's so much privilege and there's so much flexibility, but they're choosing something that they think is honing the future, and it's so cool to hear how they got to that. And I feel like I'm there with them, you know, and I love that. I love talking to people about decision-making processes.
And resonance. I mean, I think that like what you're describing has a lot of resonance in it, and it's different than like who did you vote for on the ballot or something, but it's like what drew you, you know, why does it pull on your heart, why is it something you want to commit to, you know? Like it's a different kind of choice making than the types of things we so often talk about.
But I think if you were to get down to the core of like why somebody chose to vote for Trump or why somebody chose to vote for Hillary Clinton, like I think you would find at the core of those decisions like safety, a desire, you know, to not feel afraid, you know, these really basic things that get co-opted, you know, and I think that you know, again, going into those relationships, when you get to kind of connect the dots and see like, oh, I felt that, I felt fear before, you know, I felt, you know, unsafe, you know, I think that's when you can really start to relate and make those, you know, make those leaps of compassion, empathy.
This just popped into my head. It's a little unrelated, but one of my favorite projects that I have encountered that has to do with art is Joseph Del Pesco's video blog that he did many years ago. Interviewed people, interviewed artists, asking them to describe an artwork that was profoundly
That's so
impactful
funny because
to them.
that's the last question I ask at the end of every podcast.
Oh,
But go ahead.
Well, I think there's something fascinating that happens. It's like you can ask an artist, like, what is your work about? What does it mean? But when somebody else describes it and they talk about what moved them, it's so much more powerful in a way.
Yeah.
And like, I just had this hit, like, what would it be like if your collectors talked about why they decided to
interesting.
buy this object?
A collector's talk.
A collector's talk,
That's really
or you know, to
interesting,
have a video in the gallery somewhere that pieces together these little, you know, cameos of them talking about what they love in the gallery or why they were drawn to something. Because I feel like so often it's not the person who made the object or created the program or whatever that is in a position to advocate for it. Like advocacy happens outside of oneself, you know, and so telling somebody else's story is actually almost more important than telling our own story in certain circumstances.
Well, and artists can be so critical about their work. Like
Right.
I was talking with somebody today, and I was like, you know, you do great work, and she's like, you think so? And I'm like, you obviously do. If you're that critical, you are probably making good choices. You know, like, and it is hard for artists to advocate for themselves sometimes.
But I think part of that is like going back to this idea of story. Like so often the artist thinks that the story of the art is when they start making it, and then the story ends when they sell it or when it's exhibited. But to the rest of the world, the moment they get to see it, it was when the story of the art begins. And they get to live with it, or they get to remember the museum exhibit, and it's like
It's a totally different
creating
cycle.
this nonlinear. I want to call it a map of how art works. I think is just so important right now, and allows for that space for a collector to be an advocate for an artist, not just a purchaser.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, I love that idea of asking the collector to be an advocate for the artist with more than just their dollars.
Yeah.
With their voice.
Right. I love that. Good.
Do it!
So I think because you brought it up, it's a great segue, and we have 20 minutes, so I think that probably gives us all enough time to go there. So what I usually ask is, can you think of an artwork, a film, a piece of music, a show, an entire art show, something that was either like really impactful, maybe changed your life in some way, put you on a different direction? You got it.
I wish you two might know, but it was at Site Santa Fe, and it was a series of installations. This was like 12 years ago.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
The uncomfortable spaces are not unsettled. That it had a Yayoi Kusama room. It had a room full of talc.
Yeah.
It was all these different pretty major installations, and they all had a deeply unsettling effect. Some of them had no horizon line. Some of them had no depth. They all were like missing something that we usually take for granted. there was the Greek artist's mirrored room, you know, some pretty substantial pieces of work. But
there was a trampoline.
There was a trampoline
that I remember
piece.
Was broken when we went there.
There was a piece where it was the first time I'd ever experienced kind of on your face technology in a museum where you had to walk backwards to make it work, but you could see out the back of your head. And I think about that show probably almost every day because, well, it was stunning on a physical and visual level. It was really well curated, very light touch on the didactics, but there was a lot of instructions because you had to take your shoes off in one room or you had to put something on your face in another room. But I think why I think about it so much is in my art practice, I do a lot of things that make me really uncomfortable, or I seek ways to pull people into uncomfortable spaces around colonialism, around environmental exploitation, around cultural exploitation. I'm wanting to pull people in, but I want them to walk with me. I don't want to manipulate them. And then also with, you know, I do research in communities. I go backpacking. I do a lot of things with my body that's not very comfortable as part of the research into that. And I just think of that show as this moment where I realize we have to get uncomfortable to experience something outside of ourselves. And I think about it all the time.
And artists have a certain power to make people comfortably uncomfortable.
To pull us in, to make us willing participants, and then to see the infinite. I just remember leaving that show feeling like I had encountered the infinite over and over and over again. A conceptual infinite, a conceptual infinite, a visual infinite, you know, on all these, the technological infinite, and it blew my mind. I can't believe I can't remember the name of the show or who curated, but it changed my life.
Wow.
I wrote about that exhibition for my entry essay to grad school, and it was the time that I realized that I wanted to be a curator, because that show helped me understand what curating was. And yeah, it was a powerful memory. I imagine we went to that show
No,
together,
I was just
right?
about to say, I don't mean this to be rude. It was also the first time I went to a major museum show by myself.
How rude.
But I think if we had gone together, we would have taken it apart and overanalyzed it and not had that experience of the infinite, or not. I wouldn't have lost myself in a sensorial way as much.
Yeah.
And I remember it was one of the first times I drove to Santa Fe by myself up from Albuquerque. I was an undergraduate student. The whole thing felt solitary. And now here I am doing all of this solitary work, and I keep thinking about that show.
Wow.
I remember that solitude.
Wow.
I love
How
looking at art with you,
adventurous.
but I'm glad you weren't with me that day.
Me too.
It's so cool. I'm sorry it's so cold in here. My heater's really loud.
Oh, that's
Otherwise
okay.
it'd be
I like
loud.
cold places.
I'm kind of chilly myself, so I want to turn the heater on. So I'm apologizing to myself.
Snuggle closer if you
You
want.
can huddle around this campfire.
I know, this is a campfire. Maybe we need a campfire in here.
Light that thing on fire.
I know.
Well, it's interesting because the thing that I immediately thought of is sort of related in some ways. I think probably the most profound artwork I've experienced is Walter de Maria's Lightning Field. Have you been there? Oh, you have to go. Have you been there?
No.
I had the great fortune of going, and somebody else set it up and paid my way, which was, it's not cheap to go there, which is part of the deal. But you drive to Quemado, New Mexico, and he was a cowboy, met us in the town, and we loaded up into his Suburban. There were only 6 people who can experience this artwork at once, and you drive out into this landscape, and he shows you the house and leaves you with 2 casseroles, one for dinner and one for breakfast, and comes back the next day 24 hours later, and you have to figure out which room you're going to sleep in and how you're going to work with these 5 other people, and if you're going to eat together, and if you're going to hang out, or how you're going to explore this artwork. And the artwork itself this is I think what's interesting about it, but there is an object in the landscape, these lightning rods that are placed at specific intervals in this geometry, And you think of that as the artwork, but what I found profound about it was that the entire experience was the artwork, that the artist created this whole way of interacting with it, and it really creates an atmosphere around the artwork that is very special. You know, if people were just driving up in their cars and taking pictures and driving off, you wouldn't have to invest in it, you wouldn't have to spend your time with it, you wouldn't have the social interaction, you wouldn't watch the time of day change. I mean, when you have nothing else to do, there's no internet, there's no, you know, phone signal, all you can do is pay attention to the changing light. And that is just the most profound thing that an artwork can do, I think, is like help you see what is actually there. And you know, I think I saw this piece probably right around the time that I started meditating, and I think my life as a Buddhist has really shaped how I experience art and think about art. But that was, and I don't know that Walter de Maria was a Buddhist, but there was certainly a Buddhist quality to that is about taking time, that is about meditating, that's about being in the landscape, but that's also about seeing things as they are. And I love that artists can help us see things as they are. They don't have to, you know, paint them wild colors or, you know, change them. There's like this way of exposing the truth, you know, or the essence of something. It doesn't have to be artificial, or the artificial thing can help us see the real things. And that whole journey, you know, like you're talking about, of going somewhere and experiencing a place, I felt like that place became imprinted on me in a way that other places have not, because of the way that artwork functions. And I love that. And now I feel like I'm really committed to that idea of taking time in a place to see it, to feel it. Like some of my creative work has been exploring, like, what is the emotional layer of a place? Like if there's a geologic layer, what is the emotional layer? Can we feel it just by being there? And I think we can. So yeah, Lightning Field. It's definitely among the top. You gotta go. That's very cool.
I'd love to. Yeah, that sounds amazing.
I'd love to go with you too.
That would be cool.
That would be great. I know some people, they'll like rent out the whole thing and like have a party, but I, you know, went with one other person who I knew somewhat well, but it was not that kind of, we're taking over, which would be kind of fun. Have the Lightning Field to yourself, a small group of friends.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh goodness. So I think
you have to have a different answer for each one.
Fortunately, most people don't ask me, what about you? So the one
people don't ask you, what about you?
One other has. The answer I gave last was the first time I saw one of the enormous Jackson Pollock drip paintings in person. I didn't really care for his work in textbooks, right? Know? And the first time I saw it, it was just like it was just so stunning, and I had to like sit there and just play in it for like an hour. And so it was one of those things where it showed me about like really seeing and really looking and like really like using my eyes to like play around in a painting, and like how that can help it unfold. But most recently, I was in Oaxaca. There's an exhibit at the Contemporary Arts Museum there, and it was all of these different collaborations. They had put together, it seemed like mostly like American, North American, U.S. art-based artists with artisans, with people who were like ceramicists and things like that, and what would happen coming from like this sort of conceptual background to somebody who's like deeply intimate with the material. The show itself was amazing, but there was this one, it was a video piece, and I don't remember the name of the artist. I'll have to, did it just come to me? Rebecca Mendez, it did.
Nice, good
Rebecca
job.
Mendez, and terribly I've forgotten the name of the family that worked with her. Anyway, it's on my phone, I can look it up quickly. Anyway, it's a 3-channel video piece, and it starts off with these women in alternating colors, one in red, one in black, one in white, one in blue. And they kind of like converge onto this area, and they stand on these rocks and just like stand and look at each other for a long time. And then it goes into these different little vignettes where like they're leaning on each other, they're holding each other's hair in a circle, and then like the scene changes and they're in this ruin called Mitla, and there's like all of these ritual elements, and there's dance, and then like there's religious rituals that come into play where they're in this place called Yerval Agua that looks over like these enormous mountains and are in these hot springs, and they're burning copal. And I haven't cried, I can't talk about it very well, but I haven't cried during an artwork or at an artwork or with an artwork in a very long time, and it made me cry. The thing that it seemed to really evoke within me was, the only way I can say it is like the presence of the goddess. And what the phrase that kind of came to my head, which I'm still kind of like, what does that mean? Was the old gods are back, but I don't know if they're going to win. And by that I mean the goddess. And just like seeing that piece was just so representational of a lot of the social things that are happening right now, but yet expressed in such a way that felt old and new at the same time. It's really hard for me to talk about what it was and what happened, but it was really powerful.
That sounds amazing.
Makes me want to see it.
There's a trailer online that's just one channel. It's so you can't really get a whole sense. It was like 40 feet wide. It was huge. I'm gonna try to bring the piece here. It was just, when I saw it, I was like,
here to the gallery.
I don't think I can show it here. It wouldn't work in this space. Either getting Currents to show it or something else. Nice. But I when I saw it, I was like, I have to bring that to Santa Fe. So that was that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I love that they're back, but we don't know if they're going to win.
Yeah.
I feel that all the time in this world, that there's things emerging and we can witness them, but just being able to witness them doesn't mean they're going to dominate or
but they're it's influencing. It's like it's changing things, and there's like just certain energies and presences that are changing the course of what's happening and what's emerging
all the time,
everywhere, every day. May I ask one question that we can each answer very, very briefly, maybe in one word? What are you most excited about in the future?
One word.
Or like a sentence. I don't.
What are we talking? Future, just future, or
however it hits
next week?
How it hits you
tonight?
Not one word. Give me a sentence.
Spring. I am really excited about spring. Every year I forget how much I love seeing the green popping up, the first little blades of grass, and then the fruit trees. And it's just the exuberance and the potency of spring springing forth. I love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's kind of violent, isn't it?
It is. It ruptures.
Yeah, I see that more as I get older, the intense energy of it. What were you going to say?
I think relationship is a word that is like coloring a lot of my life right now. I've been a hermit, or just maybe more just inward focused, for the past 20 years. And I'm looking at the way that it's influenced a lot of different things. So I look at energy flow in terms of inflow and outflow. And I feel like for the past 20 years, I've been really concerned about inflow and taking in and rising up and gathering data and exposing myself inwardly to greater consciousness. And I feel like that was necessary. And at the same time, I'm experiencing problems with my digestion, and I'm experiencing problems absorbing B12. And I've found that my interpersonal relationships aren't as strong as I'd like them to be. And so again, I'm looking at inflow and outflow. Okay, so balancing that out with outflow. Where is the output? How am I digesting the greater consciousness that I feel like I'm getting? How am I digesting and integrating and implementing it into my life? Which I feel like I have been doing all along, but it's just another sort of level of like, I really want to be giving more and creating deeper connections. And outflow, I guess, kind of summarizes that for me, is just a greater outflow.
The word that I think of when you're talking is metabolism, which is one of Nina's favorite words, but that kind of like processing it and taking, like the cycle of it.
Yeah, right, because we can eat food, let's just leave elimination out, but like, how do we use the nutrients that are there to act, right?
Good luck with that.
Thank you. It's happening.
It's happening right now.
It is happening right now. I think mine is really similar to yours. I see greater connectivity in people and it's not just in people, but in larger systems where there seems to be a greater understanding of how things, they might not be unified, but there's dependence between different entities. So I think if I had to sum it up in a couple words, it'd be kind of healthy codependence.
Interdependence?
Codependence, I would say.
Okay.
Where there's symbiosis and there's true, it might not always be in balance. That's why I'll say codependence. Sometimes you have to give some more and sometimes you have to take some more, and it's and you might switch and give the energy to something else, that it's not necessarily linear. I think interdependence has this containedness, and I just see all these systems that are revealing their networked nature right now, and it's not just groovy. I think economies are starting to function more we've had globalism, but people are starting to understand that we're networked more, and that ecologies are networked. I don't know. It's hard to describe. It's more of a sensation that I feel that feels like hope to me, because it does.
Connective hope.
Yeah, it mimics a natural environment more than a human-made system.
That's hopeful.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just like what Erin said, nature can be violent. Who knows what might come as we're seeing those connections. But
this is such a violent time, I feel like, with just wounds being ripped open and scabs being, falling off, and it's just like everything is so raw, and I trust that it has to soften at some point. We cannot just keep getting more violent and tearing each other apart. And
it's a dual system, right? It's a pendulum swing, and I think that we're experiencing that in certain ways, and they'll inevitably swing the other way, and it just goes back and forth.
Can you imagine the opposite, where we're just so nice to each other, and everybody's like, "Come live in my house, eat my food, eat my bread." Socialists, tear down the fences, tear down the walls.
I can't wait.
I don't know if it'll ever go that far, but
I don't know.
I'm excited to see.
Well, thank you. We definitely have to do this again. I feel like that there really is a lot more that we can plumb. We didn't even get to talk about how sistership affects your practice, which was one of the things you wanted to get to.
It's our favorite thing.
Yeah, I guess that's part due whenever that happens. So
well, you've got hundreds and thousands of other people to talk to too. So
hundreds of thousands,
millions.
But
we're lucky to be here.
There's certain favorite people that I'll probably have on multiple times. So
great, we'll come back anytime. Can't wait.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.